Hi students, it's Dr. Menchaca Banyulo. I have been pleased with the way you all have been using sources, and I think I said that in an email, but I wanted to just reiterate that. Having an online course is hard, I think, because I don't get to see your reactions to stuff, and I use that a lot to fill in information or emphasize or de-emphasize certain things. But it has other benefits, and I sent out some models last week of what I thought was good participation in writing, though, like I said in the email, I got a lot of really strong submissions. So that's just kind of a recap of where we are in terms of class materials and things like that. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to talking to you about progressivism. One last thing before I go. I looked on YouTube to see how many people are watching the video I made, and there weren't that many. So that could partly be because Sunday is your due date, and I tend to record things on Saturday. But if you're not watching the videos, I really urge you to. So, like I said, I'm inclined to just give you a general overview of your content for the week. And what you're dealing with this week is the issue of American progressivism, which I think blends quite nicely with what you studied last week, Lochner, right? Because Lochner is all about this problem of labor and labor conditions and wages. And you can sort of see how in the experience of those laborers at the turn of the century, that you have sort of the beginning of this impulse, right, to regulate, growing out of the circumstances that people are living and working in. Now we have a sort of resurgence of progressivism, right? We think of it as an early 20th century phenomena, but it's a phenomena for us now. You can think here of Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, you can think about Bernie Sanders, and a number of others, right, who are sort of trying to broaden the spectrum of what Americans think of as normal left positions. So progressivism is kind of, I guess you might say, back in fashion. So to just give you a little bit of an overview, in the 1890s, you have the experience of the spoils system, right? The experience of other types of corruption in government, and a political movement forms in response to that. I think something similar happens here, right? You hear a lot about political corruption, and going back to the election, right, you could say whether you are a Sanders person or a Trump person, a lot of that was a response to the perceived corruption of the Clintons. So something like that is going on in the 1890s, and it kind of crystallizes into a political movement. There are things such as policies to regulate monopolies, a lot of impulse for direct democracy initiatives, right, like ballot reforms and things like that. Term limits, another thing we talk about now. And like I mentioned earlier, issues that are about morality and politics, child labor laws, prohibition, public health, suffrage. You saw in Lochner kind of the way that became a protected sphere of the state, right? And it led to a lot of really open-ended labor laws. And you can kind of see how this overlaps here. You are going to spend some time with different thinkers this week, just sort of getting the lay of the land of what the progressives thought. Two in particular, just to briefly focus on probably the most influential theorist would be Herbert Crowley. Herbert Crowley is going to be kind of the philosophical founder of what goes on to become the New Deal, right? Which FDR is in charge of, and the New Deal really changes government in America in a fundamental way. Crowley is a populist. He thinks that democratic rule means that the people need to be universally enfranchised, and he does not think representative democracy achieves this. You can see him here as a contrast if you've taken American Political Thought 1 to the Federalists, right, who think that representative democracy is true democracy and is more moderate. Crowley does sort of see the way that individual rights can be endangered by a sort of populistic democracy, but he thinks that it is more likely to be more just in the long run and to conserve institutions of democracy. Equality is very important to him. And I wouldn't say that freedom is not. It's just that if there's a balance, right, there's also got to be a tension. And when that tension arises, he thinks it is more just, more democratic to emphasize equality. The second person that I think I want to sort of zero in on is Woodrow Wilson, who was a president, right? He's also a political theorist, and that's really interesting. I mean, actually, Obama had some training in political theory and constitutional law. So he's our other president who's like that. But Wilson was kind of the first, right? And Wilson is really going to challenge this Jeffersonian understanding that freedom is about being left alone. He thinks that freedom comes about through the alignment of what humans need, what humans do, and where we put our energies, right? He also thinks that because we've had this shift from an agricultural economy, which is the type of economy that Jefferson knew, to an industrial one, that something like Jeffersonian freedom is not going to work any longer because men are wage earners that are dependent on corporations, as opposed to men who learn a trade, learn a skill, and kind of start up their own thing. Wilson is going to think that government interference does lead to freedom. He's also going to think that what it means to be a leader, what it means to be a president, is to sort of be the person who becomes the mouthpiece or the embodiment of the popular will. Again, if you've studied the Federalists, you know that this is not the idea that they have for the president at all. Checks and balances are important for them, but for Wilsonian understanding, leadership is tapping into the popular will and kind of becoming a mouthpiece for it. And I think you can see that in contemporary progressivism. And even, though Trump identifies as conservative, I think in the ways that he's populistic, that this is also the case with him. And the implications of this are also pretty big for how American government works, because it's a shift, again, in American ideas about rule. So, I encourage you to read each piece that you're assigned for this week, but sort of to take the long view. What is the lesson of progressivism? What is motivating it? What are its aims? And how does it have affinities with what we're thinking of doing today politically, or the kinds of problems we face politically?